Welcome to the Eye Opener. I'm your host, Michael Lewis. President Trump issues a new statement on the greatest political witch hunt in the history of this country. The confirmation hearings for Merrick Garland continues. His views on domestic terrorism may shock you. Biden's administration is urging the swift pass of the Equality Act. What will that mean for you? We take a look at 6 prophecies our founding fathers warned us about and how they are coming true. Okay, my friends, let us dive into the truth together. February 22nd, 2021 was yet another historical day that showed the true qualities of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court denied a series of election-related lawsuits from the recent presidential election cycle, which means again, Trump and Republican supporters did not even have an opportunity to present evidence for their arguments. 2 cases filed in September and October 2020, respectively, regarding situations in Pennsylvania were denied with dissents by Justices Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Neil Gorsuch. The other cases were denied without any dissent, including the one filed by Congressman Mike Kelly versus Pennsylvania on December 3rd, and the one filed by Trump against Acting Secretary of the Commonwealth in the state of Pennsylvania, Veronica DeGraffenreid, on December 21st, 2020. This is to say, for all cases filed after November 3rd, not one even dared to issue a dissent. But maybe we don't need to be too emotional or even surprised, as the denial of the Texas case on December 11th last year already provided hints for this. The Texas case, backed by many Republicans from over 20 states, was more powerful and was critical at that moment in time. On such important issues that affect everyone in the country, people count on the Supreme Court as the last resort for justice, yet it does not even grant the opportunity for the cases to be heard and evidence to be presented. This situation should really alert everyone who cares about fairness of our future votes, whether you support Democrats or the Republicans. While SCOTUS felt there was no need to hear any evidence for election problems and injustice, they felt different for cases against Trump. On the same day, the Supreme Court ruled that President Trump can't keep his tax returns from a Manhattan grand jury. Trump responded the same day, calling the case part of a politically motivated witch hunt against him and vowing to fight on. His statement says, "The investigation is a continuation of the greatest political witch hunt in the history of our country, whether it was the never-ending $32 million Mueller hoax, which already investigated everything that could possibly be investigated, Russia, where there was a finding of no collusion, or 2 ridiculous, Crazy Nancy-inspired impeachment attempts where I was found not guilty. It just never ends." So now for more than 2 years, New York City has been looking at almost every transaction I've ever done, including seeking tax returns, which were done by among the biggest and most prestigious law and accounting firms in the U.S. In the meantime, murders and violent crimes are up in New York City by record numbers, and nothing is done about it. Our elected officials don't care. All they focus on is the persecution of President Donald J. Trump. But Trump is not giving up, he said. "I will fight on, just as I have for the last 5 years, even before I was successfully elected." He has great faith in himself, just as we do. He said, "We will win." Now, the problem is political persecutions. If we allow them to go rampant, it would never stop at one person or one party. It would go on after the very foundation of our liberty and hurt us all, regardless of which side we are coming from. Here are a few more alarming cases. Congressional Democrats are targeting cable providers for carrying conservative news outlets Fox, Newsmax, and One America News Network, accusing the networks of spreading misinformation regarding the COVID pandemic and the November presidential election. In a letter sent to all major cable service providers, including Comcast, AT&T, Spectrum, and Verizon, on February 20th, Democrat lawmakers questioned the cable companies what steps they took to monitor, respond to, and reduce the spread of the so-called misinformation by the channels they carry. The letter was also sent to all major satellite and digital companies, including Roku, Amazon, Apple, Google, and Hulu that distribute the cable programming, and asked, "Are you planning to continue carrying Fox News, OAN, and Newsmax on your platform both now and beyond the renewal date? If so, why?" As you already know, YouTube and big tech have already been suppressing conservative voices, and that also includes us at Eye Opener. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our mailing list. That way, if we get deplatformed, I will be able to stay in contact with you. And if you're enjoying the show, please donate to our donor box. The link is in the description. I want to thank everyone for your continued support. Okay, let's get back to the show. ICE, the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, is an administrative unit mainly in charge of securing the U.S. borders and enforcing the law against illegal immigrants. Biden's Department of Homeland Security Secretary recently introduced a plan to abolish the ICE agency and transfer its personnel to other departments. The new proposal would keep ICE and its investigation operation, but lose its function of arresting and deporting illegal immigrants. Biden's nominee for Attorney General Merrick Garland made a number of shocking comments at his Senate confirmation hearing on the 22nd. Garland was nominated by Barack Obama as a Supreme Court justice, but disqualified by the former President Trump in 2017. His confirmation hearing for AG has been giving us a clue as to why he wasn't the right choice for the Supreme Court. When Merrick Garland was asked if he had discussed the Hunter Biden case with the president, the nominee said,
"I have not. The president made abundantly clear in every public statement before and after my nomination that decisions about investigations and prosecutions will be left to the Justice Department. That was the reason that I was willing to take on this job. And so the answer to your question is no."
When asked about whether or not Garland regards the assault on federal courthouses or other federal properties as acts of domestic extremism or domestic terrorism, the nominee gave his own definition of domestic terrorism, which is the use of violence or threats of violence in attempt to disrupt the democratic processes. He implied that the Capitol riots on January 6 was an attempt to prevent the judges from deciding cases, falls under his definition. As for the attack on a government property at night or any other circumstances, Garland referenced the riot of last summer from Antifa and BLM is certainly a crime, but not domestic terrorism. Garland's definition on domestic extremism seems pretty arbitrary and narrow, which focuses only on protecting the country's democratic processes. In his view, it's not extreme to attack buildings where federal employees are inside. It's not extreme to attack local police and federal officers with explosives, lasers, projectiles, and harmful devices. Merrick Garland was asked about Russiagate on whether or not he would commit to providing special counsel John Durham with staff, resources, and funds needed to thoroughly complete his investigation. Garland only gave a soft answer that he saw no reason why Durham should not remain in place. Garland is also ready to advance Biden's pro-gun control policies. When Senator Mike Lee asked him, "Do you support banning certain types of firearms?" the nominee first acknowledged Biden has been a strong advocate for gun control during all his professional life. Then he added, "The role of the Justice Department is to advance the policy program of the administration as long as it is consistent with the law." The results of the confirmation vote will likely come in the next week. Do you think Merrick Garland will be a good fit to serve the American people? House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer announced that the House of Representatives plans to vote on the Equality Act this week. The Equality Act eliminates the legal recognition of male and female sex. It caters to gender ideology, and I find this to be the most disturbing. It designates the protection of the unborn as pregnancy discrimination. Joe Biden, who calls himself a devout Catholic, released a statement urging the Congress to swiftly pass this disturbing act. Ethics and Public Policy Center, EPPC President Ryan Anderson commented on the act, saying that the so-called Equality Act is legislative malpractice that turns equality on its head. It isn't drafted as a shield to protect vulnerable minorities from unjust discrimination, but as a sword to persecute those who do not embrace new sexual and gender ideologies. Mary Rice Hansen from Ethics and Public Policy Center commented on the far-reaching impact of the act, saying, "If the Equality Act passes, the federal octopus will extend its woke tentacles into almost every aspect of Americans' lives, imposing gender identity requirements that effectively snuff out the sex-based rights of females, endanger parental rights, and silence religious believers in the public square." Hassan warns that the Equality Act is nothing short of Pandora's box, which once opened will unleash damaging consequences impossible to undo. Once this bill is passed, it will be illegal for anyone to try to encourage a child to identify with his or her birth gender. The long-term results of this would be quite frightening. Terry Schilling, Executive Director of American Principle Project, released a statement urging members to reject this legislation. Every member of Congress should recognize that a vote for the Equality Act is a vote against women, particularly women and girl athletes, as well as a vote against Americans of faith. The Federalist is calling the act Destroy Our Daughters Act. The feminist organization Women's Liberation Front stated that the Equality Act is Joe Biden's war on women. The organization calls people to urge their representatives to vote no on the act, which destroys any single-sex spaces and accommodations for women on the basis of sex. Writer Ricky Schlott published an article recently titled "The Founding Fathers: 6 Prophetic Warnings That Are Coming True." She talked about from George Washington to Thomas Jefferson and how the Founding Fathers have given Americans a great framework for success, and at the same time, they've also left us a prophetic warnings of how our country could go wrong. Now, the chilling reality is that unfolding in front of us in the past year seems to be proving that at least 6 of these warnings are coming true. Now, the article is worth reading, but it's pretty long. So I will share some key points with you here and post the link in the description for you to read later. Warning number 1. In 1787, Franklin warned people before the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia of the danger of a generously salaried Congress. He said men's love of power and money will make them move heaven and earth to obtain both. But Franklin's concerns didn't get enough attention. Today, members of Congress receive a base salary of $174,000 a year. That's above 90% of American earners. This does not count additional annual allowances, which can run into the millions. Political office has evolved from a civil service to a lucrative path. We're afraid that the majority of today's congressmen are career politicians driven by money and influence. Warning number 2. Thomas Jefferson expressed concern over the politicization of judicial power in a letter he wrote in 1821, and he said, "Our government is now taking so steady a course as to show by what road it will pass to destruction, to wit, by consolidation first and then corruption. The engine of consolidation will be the federal judiciary, the 2 other branches, the corrupting and the corrupted instruments." Schroet wrote, "Our founding fathers envisioned a Supreme Court that would safeguard the Constitution regardless of the political affiliation. But only 17% of Americans reported a great deal of trust in the Supreme Court in 2020. The last line of defense for justice is failing the people." Warning number 3. The next warning from James Madison might be the most relevant to today's America. In Madison's autobiography, he outlined the preconditions necessary for tyrannical rule. Oppressors can tyrannize only when they achieve a standing army, an enslaved press, and a disarmed populace. Now, by Madison's assertion, we are really not that far from a tyrannical rule. Our government owns the army and has an extreme partisan mainstream media working for it. It seems Americans only have their guns left. Schultz thinks the press divides politicians between those who can do no right and those who can do no wrong. Today, 1 in 3 Americans report no trust at all in the media. Warning number 4. On September 17, 1796, George Washington left the presidency with a grim warning about a party-based political system at his farewell address. However, political factions may now and then answer popular ends. They are likely in the course of time and things to become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp themselves the reins of government, destroying afterwards the very engines which have lifted them to unjust dominion. Many people say America has never been so divided like today. The article says, just as Washington predicted, politicians are operating for the betterment of their party and thus have lost sight of their common goal, to serve the American people. To get a vivid example, Schultz mentioned that the coronavirus relief bill, which runs thousands of pages long, was filled with non-relevant, contentious contingencies to fulfill partisan agendas. Warning number 5. At a 1755 Pennsylvania assembly, Benjamin Franklin criticized readiness to relinquish liberties. Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserves neither liberty nor safety. There is perhaps no better example of liberty being relinquished for the sake of safety than during the pandemic. Despite an evolving body of data and an extremely low fatality rate among those not at risk, the nation is nearing a year of shutdowns with no end in sight. The article criticizes that the authorities are exercising unprecedented power under the guise of safety. It is not just liberty which is at stake. The prolonged shutdown of the country is destroying our economy and harming the next generation. Warning number 6. In a 1777 letter to his wife Abigail, John Adams lamented that the sacrifices made by America's founding generation might be forgotten by their descendants. Posterity, you will never know how much it cost my generation to preserve your freedom. I hope you will make good use of it. If you do not, I shall repent in heaven that I ever took half the pains to preserve it. It's not that Americans have forgotten the sacrifices made by their founding fathers. The heartbreaking truth is they are not being told. Only 18% of 8th grade students are proficient in American history, and just 7% of Americans can name the first 4 presidents, including John Adams. We didn't preserve the history well for our children. They took liberty more for granted, and now people are giving up their freedom for their short-lived security. Some people are still working hard on preserving our precious freedom. For example, Ross Vought is the former deputy director of the Office of Management and Budget under President Trump, and Ben Carson, the former United States Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, and of course, Trump himself and many more courageous people. Ross Vought told Daily Caller that he had set up a think tank called the Center for American Restoration for the purpose of helping both leftists and conservatives agree on what America is. Our mission is to restore a consensus in America that we're a country under God with unique interests that flow from our people, our history, and our institutions. Vought said, only those who live in a healthy society with enduring justice are better able to have individual freedom. Vought believes it is the division over fundamental ideological issues that have caused America to be so divided today. The solution to these problems is not to run away or retreat from them, but to debate sensibly. Therefore, his think tank will promote these debates at the grassroots, congressional, and media levels. The plan of the center is to win back the left in a way that cares about the other side, not necessarily in agreement, but not in a hateful way. Vought also suggests everyone to engage in similar discussions with their friends, family, and neighbors in their own environments. Ben Carson was a Republican candidate for president in 2016 and the former Housing and Urban Development Secretary and the one of the 4 cabinet members to serve Trump for the full term. In February, he launched a new conservative think tank called American Cornerstone Institute. One of the things that Carson will be concentrating on is election integrity. He said during a recent interview, if we don't get election integrity restored, then we're going to have a monopoly and it's going to go on forever and just get worse. Carson said, it's going to sound kind of strange, but in a way, it's kind of good that the Democrats are in control because people can actually see who they are and what it is that they're trying to do. I don't think most people would have believed it if it hadn't happened. It is happening and everyone can see it. And once they get over their shot, I think resistance will begin to grow very significant. Carson believes eventually there will be a big backlash. In terms of the current rampant cancel culture, Carson stressed the importance of freedom of speech. That's a reason that people came to this country from all over the world, because they want to escape tyrannical governments that try to control every aspect of their life. However, he commented, a tyranny is exactly where we're heading. Trump will speak at the CPAC summit on the 28th. Trump's daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, has publicly stated that Trump may run for office in 2024, although Trump himself has not talked about it. It is said that Trump will be developing his next political campaign this week in Mar-a-Lago, Florida, most notably for the upcoming 2022 midterm elections. His political action committee, Save America, already has $75 million on hand, and the fund will be used to support Republican congressional candidates who support the mission. Congressman Matt Gaetz revealed in an interview on the 21st that most of the Republicans in the House support the establishments, and those who really represent public opinion and support Trump are still a minority. The Rhinos often stand together with the Democrats on many issues. Gaetz met with Trump for a few hours the previous day and said that Trump is very focused and in high spirits, just the same as when he was in his first term as president. Well, that's it for today, my friends. Please like and share, and if you haven't yet, please subscribe, and I will see you next time.